What's up everybody? So the Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi trailer just dropped from Star Wars Celebrations Orlando, and I'm going to be doing a breakdown of it. So without further ado, let's get into the breakdown. So right off the bat, before we see any Lucasfilm logos or anything, we're given a scene that's kind of like a trick out for people, where we see this sort of ground that we think we're maybe seeing from up in the atmosphere, but it's actually rocks under Rey, who falls onto them after, I believe, falling out of a cave, since behind her you can see sort of like a dark fissure in the rocks she is in. That could also just be shadows, but I believe it might be a cave and she might be having a sort of force back, or whatever they're called in the Star Wars universe, kind of like how Luke had one on Dagobah back in Empire Strikes Back. So it could be more of like what she saw in The Force Awakens with Luke's Jedi Academy being burnt down and whatnot. Next up, we get some shots of Luke's island on Ahch-To. Looks really cool, a really neat island. The cool thing is as well, when we see like this bird's eye view of it, the buildings on the island that were actually physically there, I can't remember what they were from. I think they were like some people that used to live on the island, but I think they're actually going to be used in the movie as well, since you see them in the shot. And of course, this is the first trailer, they could be CGI'd out later on or whatnot, but I think that's really cool. They're sort of using this practical thing on this island, which is really cool. But they also built some, as we've seen in set photos. Next, we get to see Rey standing close to the water, and there have been rumors flying around that she might be fighting for one of her trials. She might be fighting a sea monster of some type, or some type of aquatic creature that she has to best in her Jedi training with Luke. And this could be like the beginning of it, where before she dives into the water or something pulls her off the cliff or something. So that's really cool. Then we get a really cool shot of Rey using the Force, basically, or calling up the Force. And throughout the first part of this trailer, we hear Luke's voice, Luke Skywalker. We hear him for the first time in 30 years. New dialogue, and he's telling Rey to just breathe and reach out, obviously with the Force. And it kind of pays off, since rocks and everything start to float and everything, and she starts to use the Force properly now. We then get a shot of Carrie Fisher, the late Carrie Fisher, as Princess Leia, as General Leia Organa. We don't see her face though. We see her from the back looking over a star map on the bridge of a ship, and just on the other side of the star map you can see Finn, or I believe it's Finn, standing there looking at the map as well. And I believe it might be Finn because he's wearing a costume very similar to one we saw in pictures that were shown at Celebration, where he's in like a coat sort of thing, like more formal military attire. It could be someone completely different, but I'm tending to believe it might be Finn, and maybe they're looking for Rey or a place for the Resistance to be going. And the cool thing about this part is, if you listen really carefully, it's really hard to listen. I had to sort of play around with audio levels with the trailer a little bit, but you can hear Leia saying "I love you," like she said to Han, as well as "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi." You can see just a little bit. It's really hard to hear, but you can definitely hear it. Next, we see Kylo Ren's helmet, and he seems to have thrown another fit and he's smashed the helmet up completely, and you can actually hear Darth Vader's breathing, which meant a lot of people sort of assume this was Darth Vader's helmet. But if you actually look at like some of the designs on it, you can tell it's that sort of chromey design that Kylo Ren had on the face mask area. And again here, like the Leia scene, you can hear Obi-Wan's voice saying "seduced by the dark side," which is really interesting, since Rey's talking about darkness here and everything when talking back to Luke about what she feels. So that's pretty cool. The next shot is actually a really interesting shot, because again we hear more voices, this time Yoda's, talking about how the Force surrounds us and binds us. And what's interesting is we see a stack of books on a shelf in a tree, and the first thing this tree reminded me of, and I've seen it in set photos, but I've never seen this part of the inside of the tree, and it reminded me of Bendu from Star Wars Rebels, who kind of has this thing on his back that kind of looks like a tree, but kind of isn't, because it's like his body. It reminded me of that, and it would be like a really cool little connection if this was kind of like related to Bender or anything. But the books here is really cool. We actually get to see the inside of one of the books that have the Jedi Order logo in it that we've seen on like the Clone Wars armor of General Kenobi on his shoulder armor and everything. But the books are really interesting, and these make me think that maybe these are books Luke will gather up in the years leading up to these new movies, so maybe we'll see them in comics. Like obviously one of them might be Obi-Wan Kenobi's journal, which he already has, and he might, maybe in the course of comics and books and tie-ins, we might actually see him get more of these books and everything and sort of create this little collection of sort of things. Alternatively, these could actually be his own works and like his own little chronicle of the Jedi Order or something, which would be really cool. And I'm really intrigued to see this, because this sort of like canonizes a lot of stuff. Like it's already canon, but like to have it in a movie like 100% cements it into canon, which I think is really cool. And next to a really cool shot, we get to see Rey training on this cliff with Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber while Luke overwatches her, which I think is really cool. It was a really neat looking scene. Then as the music builds up, we get to see this scene of I don't know what type of ship these are. These are like flare ships or something. They're like skimmers across the salt flats of this planet, which we found out thanks to Ryan Johnson confirming it is called Crate, and he said it's a mining planet, like a big mineral world, and it's been mined and everything. And the cool thing about these is apparently these are resistance ships, and the resistance are flying them against First Order AT-ATs, which you can see in the shot where the ship sort of drops down onto the ground and sort of picks itself back up, and very reminiscent of like the Battle of Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back, which again is kind of a good reference, because this is kind of like the Empire Strikes Back of this new sequel trilogy. It's the second movie in sort of thing, so you can definitely see like shades of that in here, which is really cool. Then we get to see Finn in, I guess, a medical pod or something. Could be an escape pod, like a futuristic Star Wars escape pod or something. But he doesn't look very well, and he's kind of hooked up to all these tubes in the back there and this weird neck brace sort of thing and everything. And I tried to decipher the writing that's on there, but it's just too faded out, and I can't really see it very well. Next we get to see BB-8 and Poe Dameron running down the hallway of what I assume is a resistance frigate or ship or some type, and sparks going off everywhere, and sort of matches the scene we see after that where Poe's X-Wing gets blown up, unfortunately. But the cool thing about this is, if you see off to the left and right, you can actually see an A-Wing, a ship we haven't seen since Return of the Jedi, and it's pretty awesome that that's going to be in here. And I think it would be absolutely amazing if he does get to fly it, because I don't know if people know this, but his mother flew an A-Wing during the Battle of Endor in Green Squadron, or Green Group, and she was sort of like the semi-leader of that squadron. So it'd be a really cool thing if like he decides to fly an A-Wing now. It'd be like a nice little homage to that, like what his parents used to do and everything, which would be really cool. The next shot we see is of the Millennium Falcon diving through the sky, blowing up TIE fighters and whatnot, and being chased by TIE fighters. Now we don't know which world this is on, since we only see the sky, but it might be Ahch-To, it might be Crate, it might be a new world. We don't really know. Something that kind of weirded me out about this is that we're seeing the Millennium Falcon in action, and it's so weird to think that Han Solo isn't going to be behind the controls of that. It's going to be Rey and Chewie, or maybe even Luke and Chewie, or Luke and Rey or someone, which is really cool, but it's just so weird that Han isn't going to be flying the ship. We then see Rey kind of ignite the lightsaber and sort of run towards something. She appears to be on Ahch-To, since you can see like the rocks and everything behind her and everything, so maybe she's training or something. We then get our first look at Kylo Ren, played here by Adam Driver, and he's looking pretty sinister, pointing his lightsaber at something. And the one thing I saw people complain about is the scar above his eye that Rey gave him in their last battle in Force Awakens, and the thing I gotta say is, like, obviously they're in this world where, you know, people can get given hands, you know, robotic hands at work, and there's clones, and there's like a miracle drug that'll heal you with just submersing yourself into it and everything. So, you know, obviously he's going to be healed and it's not going to be as big. And also, this movie's still going in production. It's in post-production at the moment. They could make that scar bigger in post-production, in CGI and whatnot. So it's definitely could be bigger, it could be smaller, you don't know. Then we get to see a really cool shot, which is kind of like a alternate angle of the shot we see in The Force Awakens of Luke in front of the Jedi temple, or his Jedi Order temple, and it's burning, and there's him and R2-D2 there, and he sort of collapses to his knees, and there's junk and everything on the floor, like they've sort of rounded up everything, just started burning everything, which is really cool. And the shot after that, which features Captain Phasma and a bunch of First Order troopers, is kind of sneaky because they're not related. If you notice on the Phasma scene, you can see like lights up in the left-hand corner, and it sort of makes it think that maybe this is the result of that explosion that Poe was sort of thrown back by when his X-Wing explodes, and it's Phasma sort of coming in and trying to seek revenge on Poe, maybe, which would be really cool. We then get a look at some space battles, finally space battles set in the sequel trilogy, which is going to be really cool, and we get to see some X-Wings and some A-Wings and these pretty cool looking new frigates that kind of look like a massive version of a B-Wing, but with the back end of like a Corellian Corvette. It looks so weird and it looks really cool as well. I'm intrigued to find out what they exactly are. They have the markings of the Resistance, that's sort of blue, and some are red as well, so maybe there's like a mishmash of sort of things that they are. And then we get the last scene in the trailer, which is very interesting. We see Luke standing in the doorway of his hut, and he says it's time for the Jedi, and then the scene comes on and everyone expects him to say have returned, but he says it's time for the Jedi to come to an end. So that's pretty big, and I've got a couple of theories about that. I don't want to go too into details because the video is already as long as it is, but maybe he wants to think of, or like rebrand the Order basically, and make something new that isn't bogged down by the mistakes of the Jedi, and they were plenty of mistakes by the Jedi. So maybe he's trying to think or come up with something that is kind of there in the middle, maybe, of the Jedi and Sith, and is the best of both worlds, maybe. I have no idea. I'm really intrigued to find out what that is. That line really made me interested in seeing what exactly is going on with Luke in this. Well, that's it for my breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it and found it comprehensive, and maybe learnt something that you kind of missed the first time, or the 100th time you watched the trailer. I know I watched it a bunch of times because it's such a really great teaser trailer, and I'm really excited to see when the first trailer comes out in a couple of months. So without further ado, I've been Matt of Fortress of Solitude, and I hope you'll join me in another video.